Hi guys, welcome to lesson 3 for Photoshop CS5 Extended The Essentials course, and this is for beginners as stated. All of the features taught within this course can be used for Photoshop CS4 and above. Today we'll be learning on how to manipulate vectors, images, and objects in Photoshop. So let's get started. Now, what are vectors? Vectors are described by lines, shapes, and other graphic image components. And very basically, they're actually a mathematical concept. And in Photoshop or even in Illustrator, a vector is a shape that is determined by points within a grid. Very simply broken down is that it is a calculation by the Adobe program. So it is described by lines, shapes, and other graphic image components, and it's stored in a format that incorporates geometric formulas for rendering these shapes. These geometric formulas create the shapes that you see on screen, and that's a vector. And that's why when you resize a vector, since it's based on a geometric formula and since the calculation is continuously changing, it can be endlessly resized without any loss of information, because this is ultimately a mathematical formula that just keeps changing based on the coordinates. Whereas a raster or a bitmap image is an array of pixels or a map of bits within a rectangular grid. And this grid of pixels basically forms your image. So you have two types of image in Photoshop, vector and bitmap, or raster images as they're commonly known. So let's just go into how to create them. Just open a new document. Let's open one for the web. Now if you wanted to create a shape or a vector shape, you'd go into the shape tool. Right now it's been selected as the rectangle tool, which is the first shape and the default shape that you might see in Photoshop. It's right under the arrow or right under the path selection tool. Just click and drag and you can see all of the other shapes available to you. You can even choose the color. Just double click either here or even in the corner in the layers, and you can adjust the color of your shape. You can even create lines. If you click once or if you click on the custom shape, you get various amounts of shapes. If you click on the tiny arrow, you'll get a lot more shape presets, and you can pick the ones that you like. Or if you have a specific shape sets loaded from the internet, you can also replace your shapes with other shape sets. So if you pick nature, it'll ask if you want to replace your current shapes, just hit OK, and it's over there. If you ever want to go back to your default shapes, just hit reset shapes and it will reset back to the original. You can also, as you notice, when we try to replace the shape, it asks us whether we wanted to replace them, okay, or cancel what we just asked for, or append. What append does is underneath your current custom shapes set, it adds on the new shapes. So hold shift and you can create a perfectly shaped layer in custom images, or a square, or a shape according to the dimensions it was originally created in. And that's how you use the shapes tool. And to convert it to a raster image, you basically rasterize the layer, and this converts it into a pixel image or a bitmap image. And that's how you create a raster image and how you create a shape or a vector in Photoshop. Now creating paths is another vector, except it doesn't have to be decided as a shape. So we use the pen tool for this. Just P is the shortcut. If you hover over each icon, you'll know what each does. For example, this one creates a filled path. So if you wanted to create a specific shape, it's good for that. If you wanted to create a path along which you wanted to place type or stroke something later on, if you want to make an open free path and use it as a selection, this is the best, this is the option you'd want. The other option is actually grayed out, but if you chose freeform, or if you chose the shape tools, you could pick this option. And what this does is it creates a layer blend mode, and you can choose whether you want it to have exclusion or difference and so on. Right now I don't think you can see the difference because we don't have an image behind it. Let's put this random image behind this layer. Basically, if you have this selected, and this only comes along with the shape tools, if you have overlay selected, let's pick overlay, it will automatically create that on the image. If you pick soft light, it creates that on your image. And that's a useful effect in the shape panel in Photoshop. So for now we're going to use the path tool, and you can use that as well with the shape tool and it creates a specific path, but for now we're going to use it with the pen tool. And this allows you to create a freeform path. If you right click, you can choose whether you want to make a selection of the path or if you want to stroke the path, and what do you want to stroke it with, whether you want it to be stroked with a brush or a pencil or an eraser, simulate pressure and so on. So right now let's just check what our brush is like. Hit B for brush, new, and go for brush presets. If for example we play around with our brush a little bit like this, and if we went to B and if we right clicked and we hit stroke the path, the brush would basically follow the path that we created. But if we wanted to include, if we simulated pressure, what this does is it simulates the pressure of an actual brush as it moves across the path. So this isn't really seen very well here. Let's just pick B. Make sure it's like this. Drop the path, simulate pressure. It's not simulating pressure. But generally it would. Hold on a sec. Okay, so let's just try that again. And this time let's just try it with a different brush. It doesn't seem to be working with the brush we're currently working with. Let's try this one, which seems to have pen pressure automatically within it. So if we go to B and if we stroke the path and if simulate pressure is not selected, we'll get this. But if we created a path, if we stroked it and simulated the pressure, this is the same brush, we would get something like this. So as you can see, it follows sort of the path the way a real brush would and creates pressure in the middle and less pressure at the ends. That's basically what simulate pressure does. That's about it. That's all you need to do to create a path. You can also save and load path. And finally, one of the main bits about the pen tool is that you can add or delete anchor points and basically reshape your path further, or even convert an anchor point so that you have more angles to work with. And so on. You can also use the freeform tool to create a path in Photoshop. And automatically you can see anchor points within Photoshop. You can edit those as well. Pick path selection. It selects the whole path. And if you pick direct selection, it selects that particular area within the path. This is fairly useful. For if you want to move the path around. And that's about it. That's really all there is to making a path. So easy, isn't it? Now, saving and loading a path as a selection is one of the more interesting bits about the path tool. For example, if you created a very complex path, let's just create one now, something like this. If you pick Alt, if you, for example, create an axis and if you hit Alt, by the way, it removes the angle that was created so that you can create a new one. So supposing you created a very random gigantic path and you don't want to create this again, for example, if you were making it for a logo or for a character that you plan on duplicating further, or for any design really, if you just made a path and if you wanted to save it, go to Edit and define Custom Shape, and it will define that enclosed area as your shape, and you can even hit OK, and it's saved within Custom Shapes right at the bottom here. So there you go. You can also choose to have it filled or even as one of the options here, and that's basically how you save or load a path. Go to Edit and pick Custom Shape. Go to the tiny, over here, the tiny, go to your Custom Shape, then go to the tiny arrow on the side of your Custom Shape, and it will be located there. To delete it or rename it, just right click and hit Delete, and it's gone. You can even permanently save it if you click on the tiny arrow over here and save all of your shapes over here as a set, and it will save them as a CSH file or custom shape file. And you can also load the shape later on, like for example this one is a sunburst and has specific sunburst shapes. You can load those as well. Now let's look into the next topic, which is how to subtract, add, intersect and exclude a shape. And now what that means, we're going to look into that. So let's just open a new document first. No, file new, 800 by 600. Now that we have a nice new image, let's work with a rectangle, for example. I have one nice blue rectangle. Actually, at the moment it's not selected that way. Don't mind. I have one nice blue rectangle, and basically over here next to the custom shapes there is create a new shape layer, or add to a shape area, or subtract from a shape area, intersect shape areas, or exclude overlapping shape areas. And by default add new shape area is always selected, but if we selected add to a shape area instead of add new shape, or instead of create new shape layer, if I created a second one, as you can see, it the paths are the same. The images are linked together. If I picked subtract from shape area, it would automatically subtract an area of the image. So I keep creating new shapes. Sorry, again, it subtracts from the image. Now if I wanted to intersect, for example, a shape, let's create a nice new shape so that we can clearly understand this. You can go, if I went to the intersect button, first let's create a new shape, or actually let's just Why isn't this working? Let's try that again. Sometimes when things don't work out, you just gotta restart the settings and go and restart it again. So this is subtract, but if I picked intersect, I would add an image, and it basically cuts out everything except the area that is intersecting within the two shape paths. You can also pick separate. So let's take another image, and let's pick the last option, which is subtract or exclude the overlapping shape area. So if I created a shape that overlapped like this, it would remove the overlapping shape area, but it would keep the external, the other shape parts, unlike the intersecting. It's sort of the opposite of the intersecting shape areas example. That's basically how to add, subtract, and exclude or include a particular shape in Photoshop. Now, one of the more important things is if you had, say, two shapes locked together and you wanted to delete one, or if you wanted to change to another one, and obviously you can't within the shape layer within the shapes panel, because it would just create another effect. So for that you have to go into the path selection tool, select the path that you want to delete, for example this one or this one, and just hit backspace or delete, and it's gone, and you have your original shape back. If you wanted to, for example, supposing you wanted to, let's just create subtraction or an addition. So if you wanted to change the option, you can't really change them here either. You'd have to go into the path selection tool, and over here you have various options to combine or to choose other options such as they're not getting selected. You can choose another option to combine or to put them together and so on. Why are they not getting connected? Let us see. Go to path, or the direct selection tool. No options for that. Just go to path. Well, right now it's not. Let's just restart the tool again. Sometimes really things, they don't work out on Photoshop and you've got to restart certain parts of the program basically. So I've basically just moved to another tool and come back. If for example, as we were discussing, if your mode, if you pick the wrong mode and you want to change it, just pick the path selection tool, select the path, and you can change whether you want to subtract from the image, intersect, or exclude the intersecting part of the image. Just hit enter and it combines the path. And that's the basics of adding, subtracting, and excluding in Photoshop for shapes. Now we're going to talk about vector graphics as smart objects. When you right click an image, you can choose to save it, rasterize the image, which converts it into a bitmap or a pixelated image, or you can choose to convert to smart object, which allows you to keep the data within the image, as well as export the contents and scale it up and scale it down without any pixelation whatsoever. Or at the very least, not as much pixelation as would occur in a bitmap file. Obviously it's a pixel, but it's at the same time it's still not as much pixelation as you would have had. For example, let's just duplicate this so that we have two versions. Let's rasterize one version, let's convert to a smart object for the other version. So the one at the bottom is the smart object, the one at the top is a pixelated image. If we stretched this out, squished it down, it does get pretty pixelated around the edges, and the same thing would happen here, but of course. But we do have more options with smart objects. We can export them as smart object file or edit the contents, and this asks after editing the contents you have to choose file and save, and it will be reflected upon returning to Untitled1 and must be saved in the same location. So they're basically giving you a warning on how to go about working with the file. Hit OK, and it opens as a PSB file, and you can always scale it up or down here. And as you notice, it's a vector, so you can even scale it up. If the canvas size was say 5x5, same as the height, and if we transform this and go into File, Save As, the same area of the PSB, wherever we saved it as. Right now we haven't saved the untitled file, so we can't really save this. You can hit. But if you wanted to edit your layers, edit your shape file, it is better to save it as a smart object so that you can always go into it and edit around. However, we haven't really saved this, so we can't really save the smart object, the changes that we made to the smart object, since they both have to be saved in the same location. Now we're going to look into vector graphics as smart objects. So let's open a new document. I closed the previous document since it might not be prudent to use what we just learned, subtraction and exclusion, mix that up with a vector graphic. So for example, supposing this vector or this shape was rasterized. And what rasterized means, hold on, let me just create a duplicate so that we can see the difference. And what rasterized means, as we talked about earlier, so the second one we're going to name shape1 copy. Accidentally brought up the layer style window, but we're going to name shape1 copy as the vector. So this one can be scaled up. This one we're going to name this as raster. So when you right click, you get a lot of different options for your shape, which you can scale up and down, and one of them is rasterize layer. And what this does is it converts your image into pixels. So if you scale this down really tiny and then try to scale it up, as you can see, there's light halo or a light border around it. Those are its pixels, and it's basically got very pixelated. So it's not the most ideal way to scale up or down your image. However, if you convert, let's just duplicate this. If you have, say, you have two of the vector ones, if you rasterize this layer and convert this to smart object, what happens is that it has saved the current vector that you have as the backup, in a sense. So even if you make changes to this vector image, if you scale it down really tiny, and then if you scale it up, let's bring that to about 100. As you can see, it stayed relatively the same compared to what we did earlier with the rasterized image with the shape. You can also create a smart object right out of a vector directly by right-clicking and hitting convert to smart object, and it's saved this vector as a backup. You can continue to do whatever changes you like. You can go to free transform or hit Ctrl T and rotate the image, skew the image, hit enter, and all of these changes are just being made on the top, referencing the saved version of the vector shape we just worked with. And basically that's all about smart objects. They're a very non-destructive way to work compared to using, for example, pixels. I think a better example would be if I took, let's try a person so that we get a better idea of what this really does, to be honest. So let's take this image, for example. Let's just do a quick select on this lovely lady. There we go. This is just to really see what happens when you... So supposing there's two versions of her. This isn't really a vector. It's just an example of what free transform does to pixelated object. So we hit Ctrl T on the first one, and this is a pixelated image, and scale it really down because it's not really clear what happens when we use shapes, because shapes have a very defined borderline. And if we rescale her up, you can tell she's pretty pixelated. So you can't just scale images up and down as you please if they're not smart objects, because all of that pixel data, when you scale something down, Photoshop throws all of that color information and data away. And so when you scale it back up, Photoshop cannot re-access those pixels. It's thrown them away. But if you converted it into a smart object, if you converted anything into a smart object, and if you scale this like really tiny, just like the before one, and then scale it up again, let's just make it approximately 100. So as you can see, the difference is quite noticeable. If you turn something into a smart object, it creates a backup, or as we talked about snapshots, kind of like a snapshot. It saves your original file behind the scenes so that any changes you make are made with reference to the original file. And that's really all that you need to know about smart objects. Hence, it's really useful for vector graphics. If you want to apply certain effects to vector graphics that are just not possible when they are vectors, you can convert them into smart objects and apply those effects on a vector graphic. We just looked into how to create a smart object and basically to replace a smart object. Supposing you didn't want this image within the smart object, supposing you wanted something different in it. So go to Layer, and then go to Smart Objects and pick Replace Contents. So what happens is, pick an image, for example this one, and hit Place. And so whatever was in the Smart Object before has now been replaced by this image. And that's how you do it. We just looked into creating and replacing smart objects, and now we're going to look into duplicating or creating multiple instances of a smart object. So supposing we just had one smart object at the moment, we're going to duplicate this so that we have two. You can either duplicate a smart object from the little layer icon at the bottom that creates a new layer. Just drag your highlighted layer to the icon. My mouse isn't working well today. You can either click and drag to create a new layer, or right click and duplicate the layer. So you can either use the little icon, layer icon over here. Right now it's not really working out well for me. it keeps clicking on very random objects. But you can also drag your highlighted layer down to the little icon and create another layer that is already linked to the original layer 1. Let's call this Smart Object Original, or O1. And this one we'll call it as Smart Copy 1. So this is a smart copy, but you can also create another one via layer and then via the layers menu. So go to layer and then hit new, then pick layer via copy, and it creates another one. So now I'll just show you why this is so useful. Let's have 3 copies of her. There we go. Let's just reduce the size a little. Again, this resizing it isn't really an issue because as we talked about, smart objects create or save, in a sense, a backup of your image or keep the original image hidden for reference. So any changes you make, they don't affect the original image. But if we double click, we can edit the image. You can also go into layer and hit smart objects and then pick edit contents, and the same file will open. So now when this is the original file from which all your smart objects and its copies are taking a reference from, and all the copies, all of these 2 copies are linked to the original smart object that we copied it from. So any changes that we make, supposing if I color the white space in the middle as blue, and if I hit save or Control S, don't hit save as because this is based on a temporary file. And then just go back, and all of the copies as well as the original smart object have the change applied. If you hit Control Z for some of it and save it again, Control S, again some of this is gone. Just hit Control S again, all of the changes we made are gone. You can also do this to any of the copies. You don't have to necessarily select the original and then double click on it or go into layer, smart objects, edit contents. You can also work on any of the copies, and because they're all referencing the original document and because you're editing the original document, anything that you do to the original is reflected back in the copies and the original smart object, since they're referencing the original. And that's it. That's basically how you create multiple instances of a smart object. You can also create non-linked versions. For example, if you don't want these copies to reflect the changes of the original, make sure that the smart object you want to duplicate is selected. Go into layer, go into your smart objects, and pick new smart object via copy. When you do that, smart object rasterize. No, I don't need to rasterize it. There we go. And we have 2 versions. So if we double click on this, and we're double clicking on the copy, we need to split this blue, hit save, only that smart object is affected, not the one that we copied it from. So I'm just going to undo what I just did. So if you're looking to create similar copies of one icon or a design, linking smart objects is a good idea because then you can see the overall effect without having to edit individual icons or individual designs. But if you would rather have 2 similar smart objects but unlinked, go into layer and then smart objects and new smart object via copy. That's it. I'll just delete these. Let's head back. This brings us to the end of part 1. See you in part 2, where we talk a little more about smart objects, just a bit more on smart objects and smart filters, which is really quite fun because we get to look at the filters menu as well as all of the fun features within the filters menu, layer styles, layer window, and so on, and in the next few parts. See you soon!